Hello guys and welcome back to FatbossTV. Today we're showing you another boss from the Nighthold on the Legion Alpha with Krosus.
Yes, it is a very interesting boss. Right, so he's right at the end of this bridge. It's looking a little bit unstable as it is, and as you fight, he destroys more and more of the bridge as you go along. So you're like running out of space and you got to deal with the mechanics all in this tight area, and if he just destroys all the bridge and you fall into the water, you instantly die.
So it's like a race against time.
Yeah, the whole thing is a race against time, and it is pretty cool.
So although that's like the main premise of the fight, of course there's plenty of other abilities that we should talk about first. Let's get the tank debuff out of the way. It's probably the most boring part of the fight, really.
Yeah.
Which is Fel Beam. This is just simply an 8-second debuff that marks your location every 0.5 seconds. After about a second and a half, these locations will then explode and just deal damage to anyone that was stood on top of them. So it works exactly the same as the arcane debuff from Korag in Heimel. Yeah. If you tanked that fight before, then you won't struggle this at all. You just need to make sure that you just run around in circles, I guess. Make sure you're not on top of melee, and that's pretty much it. However, you also get a debuff that increases the physical damage you take by 100%. So tanks do need to swap on the boss, because if you have this debuff like stacking up too high, you'll almost certainly be one-shot.
Now for everyone else to worry about, there's a debuff called Orb of Destruction. This will just lob an orb at a player that will reach them after 5 seconds. It will then explode, dealing a really high amount of raid-wide damage. However, the further the player is from the explosion, the less damage they take. So the idea is that as soon as you've got this debuff on you, you move super far away, it will explode, not do too much damage to your raid, and then you can just move back. You just need to keep doing that every single time. But of course, as the fight goes on and you have less and less space, you're going to have to be tighter and tighter together, so this mechanic does become slightly more difficult as you go along.
Another ability that the boss uses frequently is something called Fel Beam. How this ability works is that the boss will just take turns at casting a beam down one side of the room, and you can see which area is going to be covered because the boss will raise his hand and the beam sort of like shoots out of his hand. Yeah. It works very similar to the gauntlet on the Forum encounter at Uldua. So you simply just see where he's got his hand and move to the opposite side.
Yeah, and it also seems to alternate between left, right all the time. That might have just been a bug or just something that we got lucky with. So if you wanted to, you could position yourself way in advance for the mechanic. Yeah. But if you're a little unsure, if you stand dead center in the middle of the bridge, all you need to do is sidestep a couple of yards and you'll be absolutely fine that way as well.
Another ability that you'll need to move for is Burning Pitch. What the boss will do is just spawn a load of lava, throw it up in the air, and then it will start to land on the ground, and it will be indicated by little swirly circles on the ground, very similar to like Black Hand in Phase 2 or Mythic. The idea is that you stand inside these patches, and that will prevent ads from spawning. If the ads do spawn because you didn't soak the patch, then you'll have to kill them off.
Now the ad that spawns is called a Burning Ember, and all they do is just spam cast bolts on random players, dealing like a relatively small amount of damage, but with a lot of these up it can put some strain on your healers, so we made sure that if there were any up, we killed them off as soon as possible. Now you can also interrupt the casts of these ads, but it doesn't seem like they'll move at all. They'll just stop casting for a second and then recast, so you can't like group them all up by doing loads of interrupts and then AoE them down. You just kind of have to clear as much as you possibly can. Now, interestingly, this mechanic becomes easier to deal with as the fight goes on because you have less and less space on the bridge. At the very beginning of the encounter, he pretty much just fills like loads of space up at the back, so you have to run all the way back and try and soak. Whereas when there's like no space, it's really, really easy to soak more and more patches because it's right on top of you.
So as Alex has just pointed out there, the whole fight is pretty much just about the bridge being destroyed. The boss does that through a mechanic called Slam. So every 30 seconds, the boss will just slam his fist into the bridge, which deals high damage to everyone in the raid. However, there are two like circle indicators, one underneath each fist. If the tanks stand inside these circles, no AoE damage goes out in the raid whatsoever, and the tank pretty much soaks the entire thing. After the boss has slammed his fist into the bridge 3 times, 1/4 of the bridge will collapse. And as we said at the start, anyone still on that part of the bridge as it collapses, if they fall into the water, they're just dead. Insta-dead. There's no way of surviving it. You can't be live crypt out or anything like that. You're just flat out dead. So for every third slam that comes in, you need to have all your melee DPS and tanks run to the safe part of the bridge. They just need to move back like, I don't know, 20, 30 yards, something like that, just so they don't plummet into the water.
Now this is actually pretty like close. Like as soon as the cast starts, you need to move like instantly because it's pretty fucking quick and you do have like a long distance to move. And also healers should take into account that there will be no one soaking his fists. So a little bit of AoE damage will go out because of course the slam shockwave is hitting everyone rather than just the 2 tanks. So assuming you can move back in time and like nobody falls into the water and dies, that's pretty much the encounter.
It just repeats from there. The whole point of the fight is basically kill the boss before you just run out of platform. We decided to stop DPS just to see what happens when the boss does get to the final platform. It can make dealing with certain mechanics like the orb really fucking scary because it does so much AoE damage because you're basically sat on top of the player. There's not really room to run away. However, like Alex said with the lava, it's super easy to soak it because, well, there's very little room. But when the boss did do his 3rd and final slam, the bridge didn't despawn. Instead, he despawned.
Yeah.
We can assume that that won't happen on live. Probably the bridge will be destroyed. But that is literally the encounter. There's nothing else to it. So, what do we think?
Well, okay, so the fight is simplistic. It's quite high impact though. I like how like big the abilities are. All of them feel and look really, really strong.
And they're super self-explanatory.
Yeah, they are. You can literally go in there without knowing anything. As long as you've done like WoW raiding before, you'll be going, oh, okay, I obviously have to do this, I obviously have to do that. But one thing I think is that although there are simplistic mechanics, they're not very punishing. And this is just a balancing thing. It can easily be fixed just by tuning up numbers. But like if you fuck up any of these really simplistic mechanics, it doesn't really matter, apart from when you get, of course, hit into the bridge. Like, that's obvious if you fall in the water. That's great that you instantly die and everything. But, like, the Fel Beam damage, that's really low. It will take you down to about 60% health, and that's, like, whatever. The Orb of Destruction damage isn't particularly high. If someone, like, falls asleep and it does go in the middle of your raid, you will need to AoE heal it up. But assuming there's no adds up, there's no real AoE healing to do anyway. So if you wanted to, you could probably have that person sit there and then just fucking throw a healing rain on the floor and then you'll be fine, honestly.
I'd say one problem as well, that Orb of Destruction debuff, is that it seems so easy to deal with.
Yeah.
Because all you would need to do is just have a Warlock gate and just, well, you'd have to change it every minute and a half because the bridge would be destroyed in that particular area where the gate starts. But as long as that player, like, clicks the gate within 5 seconds, the raid is going to take absolutely no damage whatsoever. Yeah. Which seems like a bit shit. You can completely counter that mechanic just with a Warlock gate.
Honestly, like this whole fight is just going to be a gear check. Like the mechanics aren't very difficult. Yeah, it's going to be, because this guy at the moment, at least it says that he's halfway through the instance, although we shouldn't take the dungeon journal order too seriously right now. It's changing all the time, but it says that he's halfway through the instance, and if that is the case, I don't know, he just feels like a first boss. He feels like a really good first boss. Like if this guy was like, you needed to kill him to get across the bridge to get into the Nighthold, that'll be like, oh, that's really cool. But it's kind of just like, if it is in the middle of the instance, I want something a little bit more complicated. I want something a little bit more difficult. Because although his mechanics, as I said, they need a bit more damage, but they are very impactful, it's just like, that's it. It's just like, it feels like a couple of things are missing. Because even on Heroic, a lot of these other Heroic bosses have far more mechanics and they're earlier on in the instance. Like this guy's apparently after Tichondrius, and Tichondrius is way more complicated, but I love the idea for the encounter. Like fighting a boss on the bridge is great. We've done that a couple of times before, but the fact that the bridge is getting destroyed as you're doing it, and you've got like the 2 Masargeras in the background and all this, and although there are some funky textures as there will be on Alpha, it still looks really, really cool, so I absolutely like that. But yeah, I really feel there's something missing. After you've gone through the initial, oh, this is really cool, it very quickly becomes, oh, this is really boring. It'd
just be interesting to see if they can maybe, instead of making the encounter potentially easier as the fight goes on, which is what they pretty much did with like the lava. Like the lava will probably be like the main difficult thing to deal with. The orb is simple as hell. Yeah. I mean, when you're on that last quarter, then the orb maybe is a little bit problematic. But if they choose to make this fight just difficult with maybe more mechanics, or just change it in such a way so it is slightly more difficult without putting a tight DPS requirement on it, which is probably the idea here, to be honest. Yeah. Then I think that could be maybe a little bit more interesting than this.
Yeah, it's just a couple little changes I'd make personally, but if they left it the same and maybe just made it a little bit more punishing, which they'll do with numbers anyway, I think it'll be an alright encounter. Yeah. It's definitely a cool looking one at least.
Yeah, that's for sure. I totally agree. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this little preview, then do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. Subscribe for more, and we shall see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.